Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's session on Track 2. Those of you who weren't here this morning, my name's Nick Laycock. My privilege to chair the track this afternoon, and I'm assured that the two ladies are going to give me an easy time with this. We had a fascinating session before lunch. This is going to be no less fascinating. When I started doing the preparation for this particular session, there were going to be two presentations, and that's what you've got on your program. When I contacted the two ladies, I discovered that they had actually had the common sense when they realized they were on between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock to actually phone one another and say, what are you doing? And then discovered that one of them's talk would illustrate the other one and vice versa. So they decided to amalgamate the session, which makes my life very easy because I haven't got to wave red flags at 25 past 2 and at 5 to 3, we can just let it all roll. So that's going to be great fun. When I subsequently talked to them, I know one of them is very Irish, and the other one I detected an Irish accent after a little while, and then discovered that the two of them actually were brought up in the same town, can you believe? And they discovered that as they gone along the way. So there we are, we found the connections and all the rest of it. We're going to have a fun afternoon. The case study is Marks and Spencer's, and that's Breed. It's not pronounced, it's Breed, not Breed, not Breed, because it's Irish. And it is an abbreviation of Bridget somewhere along the line.
Oh, way back.
way back. And Celine Mullins, a psychologist, brings the neuroscience that applies to Breed's case study and trying to bring the two things together. I have absolutely no idea in which order they're going to do this, but I do know that Breed is starting, so take it away, and I'll give them a 10-minute warning. Do you want to be interrupted, or do you want to keep questions to the end? I wouldn't dare. Is anybody else? Anyway.
You can see what I'm dealing with now, you know. Hey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's have a conversation.
Have fun and on your way.
Yeah. Okay.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nick. Right, okay, so lovely introduction there. Yes, I'm Breed Nunn. It is an Irish name. Lived here for many years. Came over when I was quite young. And I'm a learning and development design manager for Marks and Spencer. So that means that within Marks and Spencer, we have about 70,000 employees in the UK in all of our retail stores, and about 18,000 across Europe, Far East, and the Middle East. So when you total all that up, it's actually a huge amount of people that I feel totally responsible for from a learning and development point of view. So I'm going to talk through a case study. I hope you find it really interesting. As Nick said, Celine and I kind of had a bit of a chat and then decided we would merge our two sessions. So this is my co-presenter. We only met last week for the first time. So it's been a great kind of piece for us to work on together. And over to Celine.
I'm Celine. I'm a psychologist and coach. And I've had a very interesting journey into learning because I started off in two parallel careers, psychology and acting. And about 7 years ago, I pulled them together. I realized that both of them are about human behavior and that we could learn a lot by pulling them together. And I'm sure you've all experienced role play and forum theatre and those type of things. I also went away and studied coaching and NLP, and then started taking in some gaming principles as well to how we work. And been working with organizations, individuals and teams for the last 7 years, really looking to help people engage with learning and make long-term impact for the organizations.
So, I don't know any of you in the room, I don't think. Who knows or has heard of Marks and Spencer? Just a show of hands. Wow, I'm really proud. In what context do you know Marks and Spencer? So is it that you shop there, or just shout some out to me? You shop there?
I've delivered training there, funnily enough, actually.
Wow, that's great. Must have been before my time. Okay. And so people shop there. And what I generally find whenever I kind of, not that I do this very often, but even if I'm at a dinner party or I'm meeting new people, as soon as I say the word Marks and Spencer, it's like the floodgates have opened, and all of a sudden everybody wants to either tell me, oh, I don't really like it, or, oh, my mum shops there, but I don't. Or I run into Marks and Spencer on the way home when I'm racing through Waterloo Station or wherever, and I buy my food there. Or I only come in at Christmas because you do great turkeys and your food ordering is fantastic. or Mother's Day, it's where I go to buy something for my mum. So it's one of those businesses, I think, that probably everybody has a view of. They either like it, loathe it, love it, hate it, were brought in when they were very young to shop there because they got their school uniforms there with their mum, or whatever. But just to put it in context, Marks & Spencer has traded for 130 years on the high street. And it's one of those companies that people still view as very traditionally British, a cornerstone of the retail world. And within this case study, we were trying to really kind of engage not only with our teams in stores, but with our customers. So it was a bit of a double-edged sword. And it wasn't that we didn't do things right, it was just that what we really wanted to do was kind of increase the volume in our stores and with our customers about what we can do. And that's kind of the crux of the case study. So we started back in May last year, so it was a bit of a journey from May to September, which I love saying that because there's a song in there, but I won't sing it. So we started with the press launch in May, and the reason why we did that was anyone who's in retail, and I don't know if there's any other retailers in the room, but you tend to showcase your product about 5 to 6 months before you physically land it in your store. So we will have already bought now for autumn and for summer and autumn this year. That's how you buy within retail. So when we go back to last May, we were showcasing at a press launch our products that were going to land physically in stores in September. And what we wanted to do was kind of bring pieces together. It was like product. So we had a good idea the product was good. We wanted to present it in a really inspiring way for customers in our stores. And we had to get it, and this was the critical piece, we had to get our people in the right place who work in those stores. And then we wanted to obviously land everything in September. So it wasn't a huge window of opportunity. May to September is not a massive amount of time to turn some stuff like the great wheels of M&S into reality. So, why did we want to do it? Well, technically, we have a customer insight unit within Marks & Spencer. It's called our CIU unit. And with a business the size of M&S, you cannot function as a retailer unless you are listening to what your customers say. And let me tell you, they will always constantly tell us what they think, be it vocal to the chairman, anybody, any name within M&S. We've got a customer service area in Chester, which there's a plethora of people there dealing with customer queries on a daily basis. And it could be as simple as, I really love this, or I don't like this, or I can't find this. But they will constantly tell us what they think. And we encourage that. It's really important to know what your customers are saying. And what they were telling us in some of the focus groups was, yeah, I do love coming in your store, and I have got money to spend. But occasionally, not always, but sometimes, I see your people, and they look really, really busy. And I don't really feel I can interrupt them. It feels like I have to say, I'm really sorry, excuse me, but can I ask you? And it doesn't always feel for me that they have me at the heart of everything that they do. So fundamentally, we do have our customer at the heart of everything we do, because we couldn't survive as a retailer if we didn't. But like I said earlier, what we had to do was really turn the volume up on that and make that connection with our people and our customers. So it was a big business objective. We really wanted to focus on cross-selling and service and just reawaken this whole piece around a fashion sense. So fundamentally, M&S is not technically known as a great fashion retailer. A great retailer, yes, but people don't always connect that it's quite high fashion as well, because of the nature of our customer base. And on the whole, we have probably about 21 million customers who come through our stores every week. So it's a big group of people who have a voice. Sorry, just before we go into Celine's one, the other thing is that with some store managers, what can happen is that you could ask a store manager, what do you think talk to me about how well you've done last week on sales, and they will be amazing at telling you, I've taken this amount of money, we've sold this, X, Y, and Z, this is our top line, blah, blah, blah. Because they talk figures all the time. That's the nature of retail in a retail environment. If you ask them to talk to you about their people and where they think their people's heads are and how engaged do they feel in their store, they always struggle a bit more, and it's not all of them, but it's some of them. And I think you'd find that that is a general theme across retail, because in stores they can feel very task orientated, and what we had to do was try and shift that task thing into more of a connection. I hope that makes sense. Sorry, there's a bit of clicking.
No,
I just want to make sure I'm at the right pace. I probably should have.
We kind of obviously came together on this only just last week, and last night we were pulling our slides together. So we have to just apologise if we're back and forth a little bit. We might be jumping back and forth between them. But we just based on what Reid was saying there. She found that a lot of the managers were very task-oriented, and Reid and her colleagues were trying to drive this message that we've got to be more customer-focused, and our customers need a different type of behaviour happening throughout all the stores. And we just have this up. Hearts and minds is something that Reid mentioned. She really wanted to help people connect with the hearts and minds amongst her colleagues, and also with their customers. And something that I come across all the time is that people will say, oh, well, such and such is an engineer, or such and such is a very logical person. They just need to hear the hard facts and figures and the data. And I don't know, how many of you were at Bo's talk earlier this morning? Yeah, I think it's everybody, okay? You know the way he was talking about we sense our environment, but really our experience is all based on context, okay? I can never assume that you and I are having the same experience, or you and I are having the same experience. We're all individuals. And we have to be constantly putting ourselves into the shoes of our colleagues and also our customers. And to do that, we sometimes think we're putting ourselves in their shoes, and we're really trying to understand what's going on for them and what they need. But actually, we need to communicate in a very different way as well. Because I might respond to the emotional context. I might get excited about it. I might be inspired by, how this will serve a grander purpose. Reid might be turned on by facts and figures and data. Now, if I communicate with her just around from my model of the world, I'm not really going to impact on her, okay? Does that make sense? Yeah? So we've got to be communicating with that combination. And if any of you have to do any performance management conversations as well, this comes up all the time. People forget that we need to actually communicate to the emotional as well as the logical. Okay? Just because we aren't all wearing our hearts on our sleeves doesn't mean that we're not emotional beings. And indeed, we'll have a look at that later, where we'll actually look at that emotional brain.
So, what did we want to do? Well, I've kind of covered this, so I'll skim through it. Great product presented in a way that customers really kind of loved, made sense of. A fully engaged store team, and this was the bit about the hearts and minds and about how we had to totally capture them from the start. We wanted to make sure that they had information and knowledge at their fingertips, and that they knew where to find that and understood the benefit of that when they're talking to their customers. And it was, again, turn up that volume on our women's wear teams in store. They are the biggest chunk of our teams when you look at an M&S store. They have the biggest footage in the store, and they have the most complicated brands in the store as well. And we needed them to be really helpful, knowledgeable, great customer assistants, interacting in a really positive way. They wanted to sell their products, and they wanted to help customers shop. And from a learning perspective, we wanted to really push the boundaries a bit. So we had to tackle it a little bit differently because of the number of people we were trying to really engage with. And it was a bit like what Bo did say today about, can you play, what's the interaction, what's the creativity. We're quite a small team in the L&D department who look after retail. There's only 6 of us who create everything for those 70,000 plus people. So it's a massive, not a weight on our shoulders, but an incredible opportunity for us to really, really push the boundaries. And I have to be honest and say, M&S is a business where because we control what we want to do from a learning perspective, no is not really an option. So if we want to do it and we think it's the right thing to do in L&D, we will fight our corner, build our case, and go for it 110%. And I have to say, in this particular instance, we were able to do that from start to finish. It's not always that easy, but in this particular one, it was technically not as big a challenge as I thought it was going to be at the very beginning.
It's interesting. We really don't know where this is going, but actually just that leads into this slide really well, because what we find a lot of the time is when we talk to organizations about, playing, having a bit of fun, trying new things out, people will talk about it, but when it actually comes to stepping over the line and making decisions around trying things differently, often they pull back. And you've probably all seen a diagram like this before. You've obviously seen a picture of a brain before. And I don't want to get too deep into the science of it, and you probably all know how the brain works, but just to remind ourselves that the reptilian brain, which is the area all down here, is the area of the brain that has been there for a long, long, long time, since the dinosaurs, etc. And we are, even though we've developed all this other brain area on top of that as human beings, we still very much respond as our ancestors did. So we go into panic, we go into protection, we go into survival. And sometimes when we have that initial response, that can actually stay with us depending on our personality and depending on our ability to kind of just challenge norms. And the thing is that we have, when we're talking about change, because obviously we're talking today about the program that Breed and her colleagues put together to actually help people to change. And as much as possible, that the area, the prefrontal cortex, does everybody know the prefrontal cortex? Yeah? And obviously we know that it's here to help us make decisions, for reasoning, to problem solve. And hands up who's ever driven a car and had a child in the back seat? Yeah? Okay, so you know that when a child is there and vying for your attention and looking for you to stop here and stop there, and when are we going to be there yet? And you're sitting in the front seat, and really you're like the prefrontal cortex, because you're trying to pay attention to where you're going, decide where you should be turning right or left, where you're going to find parking, what you need to cook for dinner, etc. You're planning ahead, you're setting goals, you're making decisions, and you're problem solving, especially if there's some sort of construction on the road that's getting in your way. And this child is vying for your attention. And that's what we're like all the time. Our reptilian brain and our limbic system is vying for our attention, okay? And so, like the driver of the car, we need to be taking control of that. And the reason I'm talking about this is because us as human beings, we are just habits. We are just a whole load of habits, a whole load of beliefs, a whole load of behavioral patterns that we learned when we were very, very young, from the people around us. Bo touched on this earlier, from our history, from our evolutionary history, from the society around us. How many times do you question your habits? We were talking earlier about, if the power has ever gone in your house, and you go into a different room, into the loo, say, and even though you know the power is gone, the electricity's gone, there's no lights on, you still, out of habit, go to switch the light on, okay? So consciously and unconsciously, there's two different things going on here, okay? And it's back to what Bo said earlier around awareness. He set up today so well, because it's just about being aware that these things are happening all the time in our absolutely amazing brains. and actually looking at how we can use our knowledge of the brain to integrate into how we make changes for people and how we move people out of their habits, how we shake people up, because that's what Breed was trying to do here by playing, by having fun, and by trying new things out.
Great. So I think I've covered off quite a bit of that. We got our store managers into the right place. These are some of the pictures that we had, and I just wanted to show them to you because they tell a bit of a story. Very iconic. This was back in May. The pink coat is one that I'm going to come back to, so I just wanted you to see that image. There's a bit of a story behind that I come to later. And again, you know, M&S is a business that if we don't do it right, we will be on page 3 of the Daily Mail without a shadow of a doubt, you know, because the brand is that important that when people see that we don't do things right, they really have a voice and will say it loud and clear. So I don't know if anybody knows, or well, not personally, but has heard of Liz Jones, who writes for the Daily Mail. She is an interesting lady, quite a tough cookie, and is one of those people that can either love or hate M&S on a whim. And because of the amount of customer base that she has, which is, I don't know, I think her readership daily is something like 60 million. It's phenomenal. She's quite a powerful lady. So when you get a quote like that from Liz Jones, you're actually thinking, blimey, okay, we're in quite a good place. So we kind of had a good instinct that we were on the right path with the product. But what we needed to do now was make sure that it landed, like I say, in September. So this might be a little bit small. I don't know whether everybody can see it, but I'll talk through the gist of it. We did a conference in the May with our top 100 stores. We got those store managers in a room, and it was a bit of kind of looking them in the eye and being very clear with them about what the objective was going to be. They were the mouthpiece that were going to go back to their stores and totally cascade and bring it alive in those stores, because like I say, 70,000 people we cannot physically reach. So the ownership had to start with those leaders and with those store managers. And with any team of people, you know, you're going to get some fantastic people and store managers who will totally engage with their teams. And you will get some that will struggle with that. But what I had to do was make sure that they got the essence of everything in that one first engagement day, and that they had all of the tools ready to go back with them to be able to do and recreate that back in their stores. And what we wanted to do from an L&D perspective was a total blended learning package. So we had DVDs, we did fashion shows, we gave them scenarios that they could work back in the sales floor. And it wasn't all about a classroom environment. We didn't want that, because that's not what retailing is. You're front of house all the time, and you need to be able to do it in a very natural way out on the sales floor, and there is nothing to hide behind when you're out there. And if I just position, customer assistants at this level are the most junior people in our store, and you're engaging with a workforce that actually can be the most powerful, because they are the frontline people who talk to customers day in, day out, 9 to 5, 8 to 10, whatever the trading pattern is of the day. So it had to be something that would really engage and motivate them. And the L&D side had to be accessible in store, obviously, but also have an approach that it could be used on the sales floor and also accessible at home. So we have an external site that anybody can access from home, and this was one of those interesting things. We've had it before we actually launched this particular thing, but it was one of those things when we landed it, it was for us all about, well, if we give people access, hopefully they'll go and onto it and have a look. And we had quite a big pushback saying, well, I don't know, you know, you're asking people to look at stuff in their own time, I don't really think that's appropriate. And I said, well, it's a choice. So if we give them access and they choose to go on there, and they're people who really want to kind of further their own learning and development, then the access is there. It's totally up to them at the end of the day. So we were asked, will you pay them to access learning at home? No, absolutely not. It's there for them. It's a choice thing. So because we were able to give that access, people went on it, and quite a lot, and were really keen to do it. And that's where I think sometimes barriers can be put up, and actually if you think, well, you know what, it's not a big deal, let them have it, and if they don't want it, they don't have to access it. But if they want to, they will. It was brilliant, and they did. And some of the sessions out of that day, these were just some of the quotes, and I won't go through them all, but this was the start of this piece where we were trying to get people's heads in the right place. So it really makes you think. It's all about a mindset change. I can't wait to go back and start to cascade some of this to my team. The ownership is on me to bring this alive. Well, yes, it is, because I'm handing that baton over to you, and I can't be in every single store or our team. People who can totally bring L&D alive, you've got to do that for yourself. And you've got to lead by example, and you've got to show that you can step up to the bar. And there is no excuse here, really. You've got to get on with it. And they loved it, and they totally rose to the occasion.
And just what you're saying there, so it was all about leading by example. If we're being asked to do something, but we don't see the people around us that are asking us to do it, doing it, is it going to be, are we going to want to do it? Is that question too long-winded? So if I ask you to walk a certain way, you know, like this, but I'm not doing it, are you likely to come? No. Okay, great. Okay, so Reid and I talked a lot about this around the fact that, you know, if you can't do and say one thing and then do something completely different. And we all know this logically, and we all like to think that we practice it. I mean, hands up who thinks they don't practice that? No. So I had, a while ago, I was called into an organisation to work with a couple of teams around developing customer relations. And it was funny because I was called in by the head of this department and the head of HR. And we had this conversation, and they said, you know, it's awful, they're not answering the phones properly. When customers are coming in with issues or complaints, they're not dealing with them, they're passing the buck the whole time, and it just seems they don't even have good, normal manners. I mean, what is wrong with these people? This is the type of thing that these people were saying. And anyway, so I went and I started working with one of these groups, and I found that the group with me were really angsty and angry and tense. And I couldn't work out what it was. And it took me a few hours to really break that down, to be able to get them to start really engaging with me and having a bit of fun and actually learning something about themselves. And what it kept coming back down to was, you know, they were really angry at how they were being treated by the organisation. So about a week later, I called the head of HR and I said, can we have a cup of tea and a chat? And we sat down and we had a chat about it, and I told her, you know, there was a very strange vibe in there. And she was like, oh, I don't know what that's about. And they're all just angry and they've had enough, and well, there's nothing we can do about it. There's competition out there, and they've just got to pull up their socks. So anyway, throughout this conversation, we were talking for a while, and then she told me that somehow it came to this point where she told me that the head of the department, the guy who called me in, he walks by people in the corridor or in the cafeteria or by their desk, and they'll say hello, and he doesn't even acknowledge them, unless they're at the same level as him in the organisation. Okay? Now, I know none of you would do that, all right? But the thing is, it's something so obvious. If you're not doing as you're saying, how could he ever expect his colleagues to actually have normal, healthy manners if he's not actually showing them how to do it? And the thing is that we can have these conversations, and you'll all be sitting there maybe going, no, I'd never do that, and that's ridiculous. I always do as I say, and I do as I do. However, if I was to put you in the situation, we might see something very different because we're not constantly aware of our own behaviours, our own beliefs, our biases, and our habits. So that's something to just keep in mind. And Reid had to, you know, present this. She was telling me, and she's just been saying that, you know, when she started having this conversation, a lot of the managers were saying, oh yeah, I'll get my people to do that. No, you have to actually be it. and then they will start. You won't have to tell them. You start being it, and they will copy that. Because since we were young children, we've learned from the people around us. Now, as we're adults, we behave as the people around us do a lot of the time in the organisation. That's what a culture is. That's why sometimes some people will go into an organisation being very optimistic, very positive people, very creative people, and they'll go into an organisation, and over a couple of weeks, a couple of months, they will change massively because of the culture within the organisation. And then every single one of us has to take responsibility for that. So, as we've been talking about really for the last 2 days, it's come up so many times if you've been to other talks, it's all about having that awareness. It's about having conversations. Did anyone go to Ewan's talk yesterday? Ewan, was it Ewan? Scottish guy? Yeah? Ewan Semple. He was talking about having rubbish conversations. Do you remember that? He said, let's have rubbish conversations. But they don't have to always be about the task at hand. Let's just have rubbish conversations, because it actually helps us to get to know each other. It develops trust, and you don't know what's going to come out of that rubbish conversation. And a lot of managers will only have conversations with their staff around performance management reviews instead of in between. And also when we've developed those relationships, it's much easier for us to give feedback. And when it comes to changing people, helping people to change, we've got to be able to give each other feedback all the time. And again, linking back into giving them awareness about their behaviours, okay? May seem very simple and basic, but we are not necessarily developing the relationships, developing the trust in order to be able to have those conversations, to be able to give each other feedback. And then blasting limitations. And actually blasting assumptions as well. We need to actually step back and look at what assumptions am I making about the person who's in front of me? What assumptions am I making about my customers? What assumptions am I making about my staff? What assumptions am I making about myself, even before I go in to have that conversation? Because all the assumptions that we make get in the way of us having the healthy conversations that we need to have. And when we actually start becoming aware of those assumptions, because we have conversations all the time with managers who say, when I really start looking at the assumptions I'm making, I've realized that every single time I go to have a conversation with one of my colleagues, I'm making assumptions based on history. I'm making assumptions based on performance that's come before this. When we make assumptions, we block out all sorts of opportunity. And when we actually blast those limitations, those assumptions, we'll actually have much more involvement from people. And that's one of the things I think Bree did really, really well. Bree and her colleagues managed to get people really involved and enthused because they blasted a lot of assumptions. They tried something different. And then once you're trying something different, you're engaging with people and you're encouraging people to ask questions. And a lot of the conversations that we have, we forget to ask questions. We just tell people as it is. In fact, I'm just telling you at the moment, I'd much prefer to be asking questions and having a conversation, but that's for later.
Cool. Just very quickly, some of the managers and what they were saying. So they want to lead by example, they want to be strong. So totally based on what Selena's just been talking about. It was all about those managers and how they were going to get their heads into the right place. So what did we do? Well, here's an interesting slide. We created a fashion camp for those employees. And this was to totally reawaken those kind of fashion senses for people in our stores. So we had 5 of them running sort of north, south, east, west, and one roughly in the middle of the UK. All of the Irish stores, we've got about 35 stores in Ireland, also came over. And the fashion camp, that was our logo, and it was what it was, a camp, and you were going to come out the other end within a fashion army. And again, that was that connection for people to understand, right, I'm really getting in the zone here with fashion and with the products. And we did it in a way, we did it over July and August. And again, we had all of those women's wear stores attend. You attended whichever one was the most local to you. And it was about making that connection. It was about having a spark of life. It was the license to join in. It was the pride and passion. And I have to say, we have a really varied customer assistant group of people. You could have a customer assistant that's worked in Aberdeen store for 35 years and has worked there all her life and totally loves it and knows her customers inside out. And then you would have stores in London where the turnover of people is much, much quicker. And a store like Marble Arch, which is our biggest flagship in London, the one physically at Marble Arch Corner, could potentially have about 2,500 people working in it. So they're like a mini business in their own right, but they are a functioning store. So that store manager is totally accountable for his own business in that store. So what did we do? Well, interestingly, the content of this Fashion Camp Day, we looked back to our heritage, and this was a really interesting thing to do. We went back into our archive, and we looked at what was M&S always really famous for. And I've got some images I'll show you in a minute, but the heritage bit was one of the areas that people connected with the most, interestingly enough. And that was looking backwards. We then spoke about the present and where we are today. And then we talked about the future. So those three bits, they made the connection together. We spoke about the part that they had to play. And then one of the really exciting bits for a lot of them was we did it with a fashion scout. So at every venue, we gave everybody a license to come dressed in whatever they thought inspired them. It didn't have to be M&S, it could be anything. And they came in virtually everything. And that was where they were bringing their own sense of themselves into it, so they felt hugely part of this fashion army. And the fashion scout sort of interviewed all of those people who kind of caught her eye as they were coming in. And during the course of the day, whittled down, sort of about 4 or 5 people. And then those 4 or 5 people were brought back on stage, some men, some women. It was a complete mixture in every venue. And one of the things that they was part of what they then did was they became part of the fashion show that we do at our big Christmas conference. So again, it was that connection for them, not just then, but in the future. And we recruited what we called our fashion army, and they were our recruits, if you like.
Just the reason for the slide is just that people really were dropped into an experience through this fashion camp. And they were really, they were seeing each other, they were connecting, they were hearing about what the plans were, they were just, it was a full sensory experience of them thinking about, who they are, who I am, who you are, seeing each other as individuals, almost outside of M&S. And again, sometimes we forget to do this, and I think that again, it's a reason why this whole program worked really well, is because people were put into this experience that was again away from the working environment, and they were really invited to go the whole hog with it and have some fun with it, play full out.
Yeah, definitely. Anyone here from Scotland? Great, you're going to love my next picture. This was our Scottish one. So this was in Glasgow. Being Irish myself, I can say this, with our Celtic neighbours in Scotland. These guys came fully ready for this day. They had banners, they had store banners. We're from Aberdeen, we're from Inverness, we're from Glasgow. And we didn't even ask them to come along. The Jungle Drum started, and they wanted to show their voice at this fashion camp. They came dressed, they came very patriotic. We had bagpipers at this one who piped everybody into the room. Nothing to do with us. One store just said, you know what, we're really proud, and we're here, and we want to share it. So this was just one of the examples. This then continued to happen for the other 5 venues that we had. And everyone at the next one wanted it to be bigger and better than the one before. And I just cannot describe to you what it was like. It literally was like jungle drums, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger and better, to the point where, my God, we couldn't even cope with what was being brought into some of the rooms. Luckily, we had the right venues. But that was the passion that was in people, and there was no way we were going to try and close that down at all. It was free, it was what they wanted, and it was their voice. It was absolutely amazing. And these were some of the heritage images that we showed alongside the fashion camp. And I know this might not look like the most inspiring picture, but when I look back, this picture was taken, it's an M&S window in around 1920. So that is that heritage piece. So nearly, I can't quite work it out, 95-ish years ago. And people saw some of these images, and they really connected with the fact that, yes, stores have changed enormously. Totally. The stores that we had then to the stores that we have now are completely different, and they got that. But what they really connected with was that customers technically want the same thing. And that was the piece that we really focused in on. They still want great service. They want people who are really knowledgeable, and they want product presented in a way that is going to inspire them to buy. And that's why it was really so interesting. Sorry, here's just another one. A fantastic, again, that was 1925. That is an M&S shop. It's fantastic to look back at it. And these were some of our heritage shots. So, yeah, things have changed a lot, but they really connected with it. And then these are just some of the quotes from the people who attended the fashion camp. Fantastic event, made me really proud. And a lot of people in M&S tend to stay and work in M&S for their career. There's generations of people and families work within M&S and could all be in the same store. And it is one of those businesses that kind of grab you, and you might work in many different areas of it, but it's a brand name that people are really proud to work for. And that's probably the way they do business as well, which is all about the values that they have as a business. You can see the quotes for yourself. I'm really inspired. I'm going to go back. I'm going to recreate this for my team. And the onus was totally on those store managers to go back and recreate this for their teams. So what did we do to help them do that? Well, we came up with this really simple idea. I'm sure some of you may well have used it. Bit of a storyboard, a little bit of a pop-up. It looked like a shop. Could be any shop, Aberdeen, Truro. Didn't really matter. So we did a storyboard and a little story ran that for them of the past, the present, the future. They had a DVD, they had some brand awareness games about Autograph and Limited and some of the brands in their stores. They did their own Wear Your Style, so they had their own fashion gurus back in their stores. Again, fantastic. So everybody who came to the Cascade wore their own thing, because you know what? An M&S uniform or any uniform on a sales floor is not that inspiring. And these guys really wanted to show, yeah, you've got me and I'm with you all the way. And then they had their own version of the heritage images that they could dress around their room, and they totally got behind it, 110%.
Okay, so has anyone ever come across Alice's thinking styles? Yeah, okay. Yourself, yeah. So Alice says that there's 10 different thinking styles, and all of those thinking styles basically impact on our behaviour. So if people are effective in all these thinking styles, they're going to be effective in life. If we're too high or too low in any of those thinking styles, we're not going to be as effective. And the thinking style conventional is very interesting to me here around this case study, because people who are effective in the conventional thinking style are able to use processes and systems that are in place and are well committed to them, and at the same time they're very open to trying new things out. People who are high in the conventional thinking style tend to think that anything new that's been brought in is very risky and could lead to the detriment of everything. And people who are very high in conventional style and who are very scared of trying new things out will, and if they're very influential, can bring everybody else in the organisation along with that as well, with that type of thinking. People who are low in the conventional thinking style tend to be very, very open to trying new things out. Sometimes they are so open that they forget about the systems and processes that are actually in place that are working. So where we want to be is in that effective thinking style. Now, or effective conventional thinking style. So what I think is really interesting again about this program is that people were, as Breed said, they brought in that heritage piece. So they were looking at what used to work, what still works, bringing it into the present, what customers still want, what's great about us, and then bring it into the future, and really painting that picture so that everybody could see. And also, as Breed was telling us, we also have, although they ran all these sessions for the store managers, they then gave everybody the toolkit to bring into their own stores, and everybody was able to have their own fashion camp within their stores. So there was this constant filtering down, there was this constant cascading, and this connection that was there from all the way from the top, all the way down throughout the organisation. So it's all about that connection. It's all about, as Breed said, looking back at where we've come from to where we can go, and helping people to feel okay about that. So the people who are very high in conventional can feel okay about it because we're looking at what worked and what we can take from what worked and bringing it into the future.
Great. So just a little mini recap. So we built on that whole thing. This is July and August. The cascades of learning were happening back in stores now. They had all the practical, the visual, the behavioural, the technical. We did the lot. And it was now the ownership was back in the store manager to get those stores ready for September. That was our line in the sand. And on top of that, we had our international colleagues who were coming right behind us all the way. So we weren't just doing this in the UK, it was going to be a complete M&S relaunch. So what did we do in L&D? Well, just to give you a bit of a flavour, we pushed the boundaries a little bit on learning. The middle picture there is an app that we created in-house. We have iPads in our stores, in pretty much all of them. And we created an app which was all about knowledge and knowledge to share. So we were showing deals and offers, we were talking about our great women's wear merchandise, we were talking about all of the L&D products that would support them. We used the iPads on the floor as well to be able to further embrace learning. Pretty much a first for M&S. We were quite worried about it, but we just thought, well, let's give it a go. It'll either work or it won't, so no harm done. The iPads were already there because we used them to sell. But what we wanted to do was use them as well as a bit of a dual purpose. So great opportunity for us, and we grabbed it. And then we have Yammer. So this was the kind of line in the sand, I think, that really pretty much blew it all out of the water. All of those women's wear teams, we set up a Yammer group. And if I'm honest, M&S is quite a traditional business. We had great reservations about whether we should use Yammer within the business. And then we thought, well, you know what? We'll never know if we don't give it a go. And we gave it a go. And we didn't police it. We didn't monitor it greatly about what you should or shouldn't put on there. We just let it kind of happen. And the Yammer site went through the roof. So all of these stores were connecting with each other. And they were saying, okay, how's your fashion camp going? We're here. Look at our people. This is what we've done. Look at our room. Anybody got any more pictures of this? And it went on and on and on. They were able to kind of just talk to each other, because you've got to remember these 700 stores are all over the country, and there isn't really a great opportunity for them to ever get together. Well, Yammer was the route through that. And since the Women's Wear Yammer group launched, I think at the moment we're on about 16 different Yammer groups in M&S, and that's anything from foods to hospitality, to beauty, to baby, all talking to each other in a fantastic way, sharing best practices, getting answers to questions really quickly. And only last week, we're just about to launch our new website, M&S.com. And again, Yammer was the means to be able to communicate some of that information through to our teams. The L&D site that we have is the third most used Yammer site in M&S. We didn't ask for that, but we're happy to take that one because it was fantastic that people totally embraced it within the business. Oh. And that was it. So as well as that, I'll just come back to my little pink coat. Our service scores went through the roof. So customer satisfaction, I don't know if that's when you get, when you do your till receipt. And then it always amazes me that people actually go on. But on average, we get about 25,000 people a week who go onto the site and tell us what they think. Customer feedback was great. Our quarterly scores, and this was a really important one for engagement, so we have a USA survey every quarter as a business. We ask people, our colleagues, what do they think. They went up, and we're on plan from a sales perspective. And we learned that actually, if you want engagement and buy-in, it's critical to do it across the business. And all of those areas had to work collaboratively together. And that was interesting because everybody can work a little bit in a silo with the size of a business that M&S is. And we reinforced as well that the products were really great and that we needed to get behind it. Shall I? I think we're running a little bit out of time and you might want some questions. I'll very quickly finish up on this one. What did we think from an L&D perspective? Because I know it's really about learning. We felt that we were kind of the critical glue, and this was a phrase that I used a lot. It felt like we were pulling, binding, internal, external, all of it together. We weren't accountable for everything that I've shown you today, but we were the bit that was pulling it all into one place. The engagement strategy had to happen across the business. The campaign and the size of it was led from the front, and we had to get those managers into the right place. And we have driven our strategy out of that for how we use iPads out in stores and the fact that we now totally use them as an L&D tool as well as a selling tool. And that's probably quite unique in the high street. And I think that might be us. First, let me, I apologise.
Just to come back to, you mentioned there the glue. What was it you said?
Critical glue.
Critical glue. And anyone who, if you think about the neural pathways and myelin sheath that actually help these neural pathways to form and actually connect. You've got to, actually can you just go back there? Back to the, so if we think about, there's actually 10 main rules for helping the brain change. The first 3 I haven't listed, which are exercise, nutrition and sleep. I think we've probably heard about some of them in other talks so far. And then also the other things are things like fun. If you're having fun, you're much more likely to learn. Motivation, you've got to be clear on your why. Why is there any point in me changing? And I think this is left out a lot. We don't spend the time at the beginning of any sort of programs helping people to get clear on why it's worthwhile them putting in the effort to change their habits. And so just all of these, memory, feedback, repetition, the brain learns through repetition. Our neural pathways are new neural pathways, which have to replace our old neural pathways, which are maintaining our habits. The new ones have to create them, you've got to keep repeating the new behaviors. And so, all of these things, how the actual brain changes, you can think about them within your organization. You can think about them within your people. How can you make learning more fun? How can you actually help people to tap in with their own values, their own why, that will actually motivate them to change? And how do you get that culture of feedback and repetition going? And just the last slide, which is about the 6 human needs. So many of you have come across the 6 human needs. Some people talk about 5 human needs. And if we look at even the top 4 of these, they say that if you can integrate 3 or 4 of these into any sort of program, and even in advertising and marketing, anytime you're trying to engage people, if you can get 3 or 4 of these into it, you're on to a winner. And I think that there was, in this particular program, there was very much a certainty coming from what's worked in the past and looking into the future. There was that element of variety, so there was a little bit of fun and change here, and let's play with this and see what happens. There was a feeling of significance. Everybody was being brought into this, everybody was being included, and people were being asked, what do you like? What's your fashion? Like, what is it about you that brought you to this business? And that connection and love, that connection that was actually brought to people throughout the organisation. I don't know if you've come across the research about people who work in organisations where there is connection, where there's a family feel, are much more likely to be successful they're much more likely to toe the line around things that the organisation wants them to, and they're much more likely to deal with customer complaints and customer issues in a more positive manner if they feel like there's a family feel and people within the organisation actually care about them. So I think that probably brings to an end, yeah? Otherwise,
Right. Gives us just a few minutes for questions. If there are questions, I've got one. If there aren't any from anywhere else. Yes.
Sure.
So just ask, you talked about rolling out your top 100
Just
stores.
it's an exercise.
Sorry.
There you go.
Hello. Yeah, you talked about rolling out to your top 100 stores.
Yeah.
Did you? What was the kind of rationale behind that, and how did you ensure that the rest of the estate kind of got that learning as well?
Well, we started with our top 100 students. And the rationale behind that is because they're the biggest and they're going to have the biggest group of people to try and engage with. So to bring 700 people into one environment is really costly.
Yeah.
So we started with our top 100 and then we filtered that down by filming everything that we did at that original conference. But everybody came to Fashion Camp, all of them.
That's one more question.
Yeah,
In terms of the iPads,
Yeah.
how many have you got in store? Approximately, how are they kind of utilising them?
I think we've probably got about 1,500 to 2,000 across our estate.
How many stores have you got?
We've got about, in the UK, and Ireland, 700.
Okay, thank you.
So some have more than others, some have one, some have 3 or 4, totally depends on the size. Oh, the pink coat! Oh, that pink coat! Well, pink coat, right from the day the press show, the pink coat became one of those sort of items that there was a lot going on in the press about. Everybody's pink coat was great. It was a really good value coat. Cashmere and wool for £89. So again, not here to sell it, it's gone now. Don't worry. By the time we physically got it into store, because the story of the pink coat was like a domino effect, and it was like Chinese whispers, by the time it went onto the website and then into store, we couldn't keep up with the demand for it. So it sold out within a week, within a couple of days, I think, on the website. And we replenished all the time, and it was gone in about 2.5 weeks, even though we thought we bought masses of it, based on some of the feedback at the beginning. And that's where you get a real sense from the press, from the press groups about what they think are the real winners, and that's why we showcase it early enough to be able to get that feedback from them. Any other questions? I don't know, what do you think, anybody? You don't have to say it was good. It really doesn't matter what it was good. We think it really works, but I mean, it's quite an interesting one.
Well, that was very interesting. Thank you very much. I'll try to be short. You started with facts and figures, so they were very left-brained, the guys in the stores, the store managers. And you're talking about a lot of emotion, a lot of fun, a lot of engagement during this curriculum. If we come back, if we try to close the loop, what are the facts and figures at the end of it? So what are the business outcomes that you measured at the end of this?
The business outcome was obviously our service scores, our customer satisfaction rose 5% over that period of time, and is still growing. Internally for our people, the USA survey, which is what we measure how people feel within the business, those scores went up on some around 15% because they felt much more engaged with whether business was going, were we on the right track. I think some of the questions are, do you feel you have the right tools to do your job? Do you have the right level of learning and development for you in your job? And everybody gets asked the same questions, whether you're, the highest level in M&S or whether you're a customer assistant or you'll get asked the same questions. All of the scores went up, so that was about engagement. I can't really go into the sales figures because obviously that's confidential as a business. I can't basically go into what the sales figure was, but what I can say is they did improve. And I can't really say more than that. And our shares potentially did improve. myself, but
Okay, we're going to have to call the halt there. We've got tea break, which, as I said before, lunch is the opportunity to catch these two lovely ladies and talk to them some more about it. Thank you very much.
thank you.
I think it was